So we've just defined the deep state machine. But now let's put faces and dollars to it. Let's go to chalkboard number 2. Chalkboard number 2 is the web of influence. This is where the ODNI report and the Durham Annex really shines a light on all of the operatives. And let's start here with the Kingpins, okay? John Brennan, Obama's CIA director, he led the manipulated ICA, the intelligence community assessment on Russia. Tulsi Gabbard's ODNI release puts him right square at the top. Then you have James Clapper. He was the DNI. He signed off on that intelligence report, but he also was part of the 51 intelligence officials that lied about the Hunter Biden laptop from hell. That shows that even though some of these people are no longer in office, they still manipulate behind the scenes. John Brennan can still, when he was here originally, he could go right down to the media. But now he's out. But he can still be seen on cable news, pushing along a narrative. James Comey, FBI director, he oversaw Crossfire Hurricane. He also, according to the Durham Annex, closed down an investigation into Hillary Clinton's email server due to the explosive nature of the sensitive intelligence that revealed Hillary's plan was to smear Trump. And Hillary Clinton, well, her campaign funded the Steele dossier per Durham. The annex specifically details her plan to tie Trump to Russia and how her campaign was allegedly allied within people in the Obama administration. That indeed, the Attorney General Loretta Lynch was part of that. And then there was George Soros. George Soros, by the way, his birthday was yesterday. He's 95, still kicking, but he's able to see his whole life unravel and his empire begin to crumble. But he is the founder of the Open Society Foundation. The annex names his organization in the confidential DNC talks for the smear on Donald Trump. As of 2023, George Soros was one of the Center for American Progress's Action Fund, one of the largest single donors. CAP Action. It was one of the most influential private organizations pushing the Russian collusion narrative. Remember, we get the plan, it comes down to places like Open Society, and then it's pushed down even more. You get the intel officers, you get the surveillance, you get the media. Now, one of their initiatives at the time was the Moscow Project. It's amazing that the internet is still forever, right? I mean, it's still online. And if you read it, it's actually pretty hilarious because, well, other operatives include Peter Strzok, Lisa Page at the FBI, Jake Sullivan, Biden's national security advisor, Hillary Clinton's aide tied to the hoax planning. And Sullivan's name began to first pop up around Russiagate, the hoax back in 2021. And I will tell you, I mean, get the feeling that there's a reason he constantly floats from one administration to the next, but we'll have to look more into that. Then you have Christopher Steele, the MI6 alum who authored the Steele dossier. Mark Milley, the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I'm sorry, but if you have a headline like this one, secretly calling China over fears Trump could spark war. I mean, you're going to get added to the deep state candidate list every time. I think it's an automatic. Then you have Andrew McCabe. Andrew McCabe was the director of the deputy director of the FBI. This one is obvious for being the dude that signed the bogus FISA warrants against Trump's staff. Remember, they doctored them. They changed them. Took a little whiteout, then retyped them and changed them. He signed them. Then they went to get the FISA warrant. And then there's this little nugget. The text from Peter Strzok to Lisa Page, quote, "I want to believe the path you threw out for consideration in Andy's office, that there's no way he gets elected. But I'm afraid we can't take that risk. It's like an insurance policy in the unlikely event you die before you're 40. Wow. Now, McCabe says, I don't remember that at all. What? I don't remember that conversation. But 2 other FBI employees do remember. But I guess he would deny that, too. And now the congressional enablers. You have Adam Schiff. This guy is in real trouble. He was pushing the Russia hoax as the chair of the Intelligence Committee. He was also alleged this week to be responsible for the leaks of intelligence directly from the Intel Committee. So he's the guy who was leaking it. And we have it now, dead to rights. And the FBI ignored it. And yet he's still in office. Then you have Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. They were the gang of 8 members together, so you knew the truth, but pushed the Russia hoax right in your face anyway. They're also still in office. Senator Mark Warren, he sent a text message to the Russian oligarch. Not a problem, right? You know what? You should really speak to Christopher Steele. Quote, "We have so much to discuss. We need to be careful, but we can help our country." That's what Warner wrote. The reply came back from the Russian oligarch, "I'm in." Also, he's still in office. Now, I'm sure this list could go on and on and on. We could add Liz Cheney and Mitch McConnell, maybe, I don't know. But the funders are on the board that we know. The Open Society Foundation. This is George Soros. As I mentioned earlier, USAID funneled $270 million to George Soros adjacent organizations for democracy programs all over the world. And this isn't even a fraction of it. I'll get to more later on in the show. But the Tides Foundation, Arabella Advisors, when you want your money to go dark, these are the places that you immediately send them to. You got the Gates Foundation. The trail on this one's way deep. In 2020 alone, they funneled $127 million through the Arabella network. Oh, isn't that weird? That's the COVID year, isn't it? In total, Bill Gates and his foundation is Arabella's single largest donor, totaling nearly $500 million. The MacArthur Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation, you got these two clowns. They fund some of the think tanks that I've mentioned tonight, like the Council on Foreign Relations. But let's not forget the government funding pipelines. This is where USAID comes in. USAID channels tax dollars to groups like those associated with Open Society, for democracy abroad. But it boomerangs and it comes back to us domestically. The State Department also funds groups like this. They fund the National Endowment for Democracy, NED. It's a quasi-government entity with $315 million budget for influence operations. These also come back around and boomerang domestically. Then the Pentagon. Well, let's just say this. From 2020 to 2024, the Pentagon awarded private military contracts of over $2.4 trillion. They also fund, as the Durham Annex calls, the think tanks, or at least some of them. And they've been doing that since 2019. The Pentagon has funded $1.4 billion towards the think tanks. The Department of Homeland Security funded multiple entities for censorship on American citizens. And they were working right with the Brits. If you're a fan of Data Republican, who I absolutely love, you can use her website and it'll track all of these funding flows. And it shows how your taxes fund this machine. For example, Soros's Open Society Foundation, engineering political disruption in Eastern Europe. Did you know that? Oh, yeah, you watched the show. You did know that long time ago. We're going to get to that and how it all ties in after the break. But the web is not accidental. It is designed for control. The Durham Annex actually helped expose a lot, way more that's being reported, and it is all connected. Now, when we come back, I'm going to show you how this network fuels global instability, scandal. We've been covering this for a very long time, but because of these two reports, we now have the proof that this is fact. And I'll show you how it all comes together and what they've been doing for the last 10 or 15 years next. Welcome back. All right, so we have the machine, and now we have the players. Now let's look at the things that they've been doing for the past 10 plus years. All of these players and organizations have involved in some way or another. The deep state has left a trail, and it may not have started as something that they could use internally. I think they did do that, but they were learning. They used the rest of the world to learn, and it's easily tracked throughout our history, okay? So we now know what to look for. We know the parts within the machine. So now it should be pretty easy to trace the entire operation, right? And that's Chalkboard 3. This is the deep state timeline over the last 20 plus years. And these things were not isolated. They're patterns of the U.S. backed interference, exposed by leaks, Freedom of Information Act, and now disclosures like the Durham Annex and Tulsi Gabbard's her ODNI report that she released. And it all started, this is as far back as we've gone, but we think it all started about 2000. And there was the Serbia bulldozer revolution. I don't really even remember this. But I'm starting with this event because it provides a very successful template for color revolution. And this is the template that is followed over and over and over again. And you will actually see the characteristics of it happening here at home by the time we get there. Now, USAID, they use their insane budget and the tax dollar funneling system through organizations like the National Endowment for Democracy. Why? Well, let's see if this sounds familiar, like a trend that we've seen over the years, both at home and abroad. They train street activists to overthrow the ruling government. How do we know they did this? Well, it's nothing classified. It's not hidden in some vault below the State Department. They bragged about it and used it as a case study on their website. But they didn't do it alone. Remember, the deep state, this machine here, it has multiple parts. We've already identified them. They got help from people like George Soros and his foundation, that network. Color Revolution also enlisted the help of private U.S. companies. WikiLeaks exposed email correspondence between the intelligence firm Stratfor and one of the regime change NGOs on the ground. Now, a few years later, this correspondence continued, this time with another blueprint. They wanted to pull off a similar operation in Venezuela. But the result was a successful ouster of the Serbian government. Now they've done it twice. Now everything, the template's really set. So in 2003, Georgia's Rose Revolution began. The Serbian template was followed almost exactly. The U.S. tax dollars flowed into Serbia. The George Soros Foundation was linked to the main activists on the ground. We were there with the State Department, and the result, success. A pro-Western government was installed. Then you get here. The Orange Revolution, 2004. This is one of the first revolutions with the Ukraine. Millions of tax dollars flowed into the first color revolution in Ukraine, and the usual suspects all involved yet again. And the reporting from that time was very matter-of-fact about what was happening. U.S.-backed color revolutions were popping up now all over. And America was using the Serbian template to upend the world piece by piece. Got it? 2000, 2003, 2004. Now the machine it's learned enough to get a little arrogant and say, I think we can do more. And they leveraged their funding mechanisms through organizations that we're now hearing about, the National Endowment for Democracy, Freedom House, on and on. George Soros involved there again. Then you get to the Arab Spring. And the Arab Spring, we were told by the media operatives that this was all spontaneous. Well, now we hear that all the time, and when you hear somebody say, this is spontaneous and mainly peaceful, it's the exact opposite. I talked about the Arab Spring for years. The State Department, under Obama, USAID, NED, all of them, they were on the ground training activists all over the region. I didn't know that at the time. The Serbian template was for a single country, but it was now being used to destabilize multiple continents with our tax dollars. When I put up on the chalkboard that the destabilization of Europe and the Western world would happen, I never thought it would be funded by us with our dollars. And as usual, in that one, George Soros was also involved. 2014, Ukraine, the Maiden. Now, this is the big one. Check out my Ukrainian chalkboards to get the full deep dive on the deep state and what it was up to in Ukraine. This one is incredible. This was a U.S.-backed color revolution with exactly the same players, utilizing the same funding, the same money flows, the same organizations. And leaked emails now show George Soros took a particularly personal role in the rebuilding and organization of the cleanup effort that went with the new regime. Then you have Macedonia. This is 2012 to 2016. The State Department and USAID gave $5 million to George Soros and his Open Society Foundation. They gave it in Macedonia for protests against conservatives. A FOIA from Judicial Watch showed how the George Soros group was translating Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals for Macedonian street activists. I could go on and on with this pipeline. There's a pattern over 20 years. It's been the same. The deep state uses the same funding mechanisms, the same NGOs, the same think tanks, and the same outside sources like George Soros. Deep state operations have been and are still funded by our tax dollars through entities like USAID, the State Department, NED. That money is then laundered out to organizations like the Open Society Foundation and to other NGOs on the streets. The think tanks like the Atlantic Council, Carnegie, and others, they all advise on policies. But this now appears like nothing more than laundered thought directly from an unelected parallel government inside called the deep state. With the new releases of both the ODNI report and the Durham Annex, you now have a much more clearer picture than we've ever had before. By the way, the one after Macedonia, everything that they learned, same players, same exact players, did all of this without you even knowing about it. And what was their next revolution? Because it also happened in 2016. It was the election here. They used all of the same things on you. This time with your money, they used propaganda and tried to overthrow your will.